Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. 30 seconds early. How about that, Zach? We are
Mm,
30 seconds early because we just had to talk about these college football playoff rankings. Can't spend too much time on them because we got a lot to discuss in this episode, but we will review them a little bit and give our thoughts. Zach, Oregon, number one. Ohio State, number two. They did it. They put Ohio State above Georgia. Congratulations. You watched
yeah.
football. That's great.
Amen.
we
Amen.
we can tell they've watched a little bit of football this year. Good job.
Yes.
Penn State at 6, Indiana at 8, and that's it. They obviously didn't watch enough football because they have other teams in the top 25 and they don't have Iowa and Minnesota. That's my
Rank
thoughts.
Iowa and Minnesota, you cowards.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's my takeaway.
Yeah. Did you have any other takeaways?
So I actually think it's quite significant that Oregon and Ohio State are 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And that they didn't fall for the trap that is Georgia to put them at number 2. I really thought it would be Georgia 2. And I thought it mattered that Penn State was above Tennessee. I think those things matter because if teams want to rise, I think a couple of reasons. One, if teams in the Big Ten want to rise, they have opportunities to do so. Like Minnesota has a game against Penn State. Washington has a game against Penn State. And I think it also signals that if these 4 teams, like even if Indiana loses to Ohio State, they might be on the precipice, but I think Indiana is going to be safe, even if they lose to Ohio State. Like I think if everybody wins out, except for Indiana losing to Ohio State, and even Ohio State losing to Indiana, I think the Big Ten's getting 4 teams in. Like that's my biggest takeaway from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Indiana has a really good shot as long as they don't get blown out by Ohio State. Now, obviously, the best thing for Indiana would be to beat Ohio State. That would for sure get you in there, and there's no way they're taking Ohio State out after they beat Penn State the way they did. And Penn State kept it close in that one. So, I mean, if you're truly rooting for the Big Ten and you have no rooting interest, then you would want Indiana to beat Ohio State. However, if you're a fan of Ohio State, you obviously don't want that to happen. I think if you're a fan of Indiana, like I said, even if you lose to Ohio State, as long as it remains competitive, you should be fine. And I think if they get a blowout win against Michigan this weekend, that's going to help even more for their
Yeah.
perception. Even though Michigan is not a great team, I think the defending national champions, all that stuff. I just wish Indiana would have played this game earlier on in the year because Texas is still living off that Michigan win. Like
Yeah.
Michigan was ranked high, so people are like, "Oh, they got that top 10 win," and it's like, guys, it's not top 10. Michigan is 4-5. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. There is so much luck in when you play teams, and it just like imagine if Indiana played Nebraska when they were 5-0, right?
Yep. Yeah,
But
when they were like ranked, I think because
they were
Nebraska
getting
was ranked
votes.
when they played Illinois or no?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, were they 5-0 or 4-0 when they played Illinois? They were
I
4
think they were
4-0,
three
I
and
think.
0. I think they were
Oh, were
3 and
they?
0, but they had a win. They had
Oh,
a win against Colorado, which
oh,
I
that's right.
think
Getting
made
all my
made
history
it
mixed
bigger.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's a travesty that Iowa is not ranked. You literally have Ashton Genty's, clone and Caleb Johnson. It's just Caleb Johnson has actually played better defenses. So, with actual like Power 5 talent
yeah,
consistently, Ashton Genty played one, and that was it in Oregon. And that's when Oregon was struggling a little bit more early on in the season, and he had a really good game. So, props to him for that. But Caleb Johnson is facing Power 4 defenses week in and week out,
yeah,
and he is still putting up similar, obviously not the same. I think Genty has like maybe 300 more yards, but he's putting up very similar numbers, the most similar out of anybody in the country to Ashton Genty. But of course, Iowa doesn't get any credit for being top 25, and Caleb Johnson remains on nobody's Heisman watch list. Instead, we have the Arizona running back on Heisman watch list, the Arizona State running back on Heisman watch list, who has like
LOL.
400 less yards and like 5 less touchdowns than Caleb Johnson.
It's like ESPN has no rights to the Big Ten. Oh wait,
Yeah.
I will say I'll push back just a little bit Well, two things I want to say. One, I'll push back a little bit. I think Iowa at very least should be ranked.
Yeah.
But the only 3-loss team in these rankings is Louisville, who does have a win over Clemson. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I am grateful that they're not putting SEC crap with 3 losses in over Iowa. Like Vanderbilt, who people were saying, well, Vandy looks good. Listen, guys, resume matters. Like, I'm gonna like, if you're annoyed with me continuing to bring up the Georgia State loss, well, just keep on being annoyed because that matters. Like
Yeah.
Georgia State sucks and you have to be penalized for it. And they have not looked great against other teams, including Auburn, who stinks. And like, so I'm glad that they didn't fall for that. And while Missouri is 6, like Missouri stinks too, but they're 6-2. They haven't played a good schedule, but I'm like, okay, I can get on board with that for now. They'll lose. They have Army in there at 8-0. Good for them. Like, so there's a lot in here that I'm like, I can understand it. I actually thought they did a pretty good job. This is where my butt comes in though. And this is partially to get
ready for the butt, everybody. Here it comes.
It's a big butt. I know I've been accused of being a hater of the Hoosiers.
Just in one episode. Just
in one episode. Somebody got on Instagram, followed me just to tell me I was clueless because of my Indiana take.
Wow.
So like that's commitment, man. Why is Miami ahead of Indiana? Like objectively, why is Indiana not 5th or 4th?
Why is Tennessee above Indiana? Why is Penn State above Indiana? I mean, there's a number of teams up there. Why are they above Indiana? And the truth is, it's because of brand. It's because of preseason rankings. Because guess what? You know who had a very similar resume to this last year, and they were ranked number 3 in the nation, Zach? Michigan. Michigan had a very similar resume to what Indiana has right now. They were playing teams that were not nearly on their level. They were blowing them out. They had nobody in their non-conference. They were just playing Big Ten teams and blowing them out, and they weren't ranked Big Ten teams. And of course, Michigan, because of the year before, they went to the College Football Playoffs, even though they lost to TCU the year before, and they get ranked 3rd. But instead, we have Indiana ranked 8th. Because they don't have the brand bias of a lot of these other teams, and they didn't have the success last year, which is so stupid. It's so stupid to bring in last year. I mean, if you have like a bunch of players coming back, maybe, but I mean, I think you can think a little bit about coach, but if you're thinking about coach, Kirk Cigneti has won everywhere he's gone, so you have to give him credit for that. But of course they don't.
And the biggest thing that people will bring up is strength of schedule. But then that's why, like, Miami as the comp is what's annoying. It's like Miami has played teams like Virginia Tech, who's like, okay, Duke, who's okay, but they've struggled against those teams. Indiana has played mediocre competition as well. Their best win is probably Washington. And it was a 2-score victory with their backup. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
Like Miami has not, their best win is Louisville.
It shows that Indiana,
it
shows that Indiana is actually a complete team. Miami is just a good quarterback who, guess what? When he throws interceptions and struggles, Miami struggles because they don't have a defense. Just last week and the week of Washington, they get pick sixes, and that's how they get the momentum to win that game because the defense is the one that showed up. The running game is the one that showed up. Miami doesn't do that. Miami says Cam Ward win us every single game, and guess what? If Cam Ward doesn't show up for one game, you have the game like Virginia Tech, which has a lot of controversy in it, and you could argue they should have lost in that one, but Indiana hasn't had a game like that. Indiana has beat all their opponents by 2 scores or more.
Yeah. This is a hot take. I think either Miami loses to Syracuse or they lose in the ACC championship game to SMU. Because I just don't think
they're going to lose at some point. They're not going to be undefeated.
Yeah.
They're not good enough. They're not a complete team. They're going to lose at some point.
And here's my question: if they get to the ACC title game and lose, do you think they make the playoffs still? Because their schedule is awful, and they
Who,
have
Miami?
no good wins. Yeah, Miami.
Oh yeah, they'll still make it. They're ranked fourth right now. They lose, they're not dropping.
Yeah,
They're not dropping any more than 4 or 5 spots, which is
that's a good
crazy
point.
because Ohio State lost. Ohio State was ranked number 1 last year. They lost to number 2 Michigan, and they dropped like 7 or 6 spots. It just it's stupid. I don't mean to bring up last year, but it's just
Yeah.
stupid. Like
Blow up the system. No, it's
yeah.
fine.
We wanted no SEC bias, but we got it. So thanks, college football playoffs. Speaking of SEC bias, Philip says, "Why is Missouri ranked SEC bias?" Totally agree. I mean, that should be Iowa or Minnesota spot. Missouri has lost by a combine of like 75 points to Alabama and Texas A&M. Texas A&M just lost to South Carolina. South Carolina, who doesn't have an offense. Really good defensive line. Give them credit there.
Yeah.
But a South Carolina team that hasn't had an offense all year, and they put up 44 on Texas A&M. Missouri put up 10. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I can understand Missouri with 2 losses over a 3-loss team. I can understand that. But I think if Iowa wins out and they're still not ranked, that's a real problem.
Yeah, I'm just asking for consistency. If you're gonna talk about Indiana's strength of schedule and stuff like that, like let's talk about Missouri's. Let's talk about all these teams that
That's fair. That's fair.
John is saying this whole playoff concept is new to us Indiana fans. Yeah, hey, well we're fighting for you. Don't worry, John. Not many times do you get to be new into something and you get everybody fighting for you. So we're here for you, John. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Philip says rankings will be biased to have SEC home games in the tournament.
Probably, but you're right. You're right.
I think if the Big Ten gets 4 teams in, they're guaranteed at least two games, I would think. Penn State and either Ohio State or Oregon, whoever wins that Big Ten championship game is probably guaranteed. But then outside of that, you have Indiana. But if they lose to Ohio State, I don't think they're getting a home playoff game. I don't think they're going to give Indiana a home playoff game anyway. Like, they're not going to put a playoff game in Bloomington.
Yeah.
As stupid as that is.
It's dumb. Yeah. Unless they beat Ohio State and lose in the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah. John asks, NFL draft question. I know running backs aren't as highly valued, but tell me how Genty is below McMillan from Arizona in mocks. I don't put any. The mock drafts change so much. They're literally just for clicks right now. I don't put hardly any like stock into them. Here and there, I might look at one and post it and stuff just to see if something big has changed. But I almost guarantee Genty will be one of the first running backs taken off the board. I know he's a little bit smaller, but if he has the season he's having right now, he should be.
It would depend on his measurables, I think. Like, I think that could be a big part of it.
Yeah. And then Philip says, Miami could have 3 losses easily because of close calls. Yeah, Virginia Tech, I'm forgetting who the other 2 are, but yeah, they've had close calls. Was Louisville one as well?
Cal and Louisville.
Oh, yeah, Cal, who's awful.
Yeah, Cal should have.
Cal was like the only team that's worse than Florida State in the SEC.
Cal, yeah. Cal and the ACC. Good job, Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yep. And then last one, John says, On 3 reported Julian Lewis is coming to Bloomington. For another report came out today, he wasn't coming to Bloomington anymore, so that sucks. Yeah, I don't know. I was going to talk about that in the game preview for Indiana, Michigan. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I never really rely on that stuff until like Thursday or Friday because sometimes the kids, they don't make the decision until then. So we'll see. I'd say I would just say don't believe it just yet. Just wait till Thursday or Friday. See if there's like a final report or something like that.
He needs to go somewhere other than USC because USC is a dumpster fire right now.
Yep. Well, Zach, should we talk about USC?
I had thought about making a transition there, so
good job.
Let me lob that softball up to you.
There we go. Lincoln Riley reports indicate that he plans to bench Miller Moss for Jayden Maiava. I apologize if I said that wrong. So, Zach, report came out last night. I think I texted you when it came out, super late, like 1 a.m. Of course, for
I
them
saw
it's
it.
like 10 o'clock, but still, that's late for a
I
report to
saw it at
come out.
6 a.m.
Okay, there you go. Apparently, the backup quarterback for USC, Jayden, is going to be starting in place for Miller Moss against Nebraska. Now, they are both on a bye week this week, so they do have time to figure that out. I don't know if, maybe the straw that broke the camel's back was this game, or if Lincoln Riley was waiting for the bye week, or what was going on there. But it sounds like Lincoln Riley has been talking up Jayden and just saying he's been improving, he's a better fit for the offense and stuff like that. Do you buy that, Zach, that just Jayden's a better fit for the offense? Miller Moss hasn't been very good. He's not been fast enough, and Jayden is a little bit more mobile. Do you buy that, or do you think there is something else going on here at USC?
So I find it interesting. One, he's benching him the day after, 2 days after he Miller Moss has the most picks he's thrown in a game, right? So 3 picks against Washington. I find that interesting. I also find it interesting that he's announcing it 11 days before their next game. I think this is a desperate coach who's trying to save his job. And I think it's a terrible, terrible way to do it. Because if anything, if you're going to make the switch, don't say anything until Friday before the game. Like, now you're alerting Nebraska, like, hey, prepare for somebody else. Like, it's similar to Michigan earlier this year, where it's like, we're going to start this guy. And it's like, why wouldn't you let them guess? Make them have to prepare for all 3 of your quarterbacks. Not that they have one, but like, make them prepare. And it's the same thing here. And quite honestly, is Miller Moss the biggest problem with USC right now? Is
No.
Jayden Maiava that much better than Miller Moss? I don't think. I think Miller Moss at this point is a scapegoat. That's it. Now, I haven't seen Maiava play, so like maybe he's marginally better, but the fact that they haven't gone to him at all in any game, including the Washington game, when they could have done it then with Miller Moss throwing 3 picks. The fact is, it was 4th down. They run a running play to Woody Marks, and they get stuffed, and that's what closes the ball game. And you're going to pin that on Miller Moss? Like, dude, what is this? This is a desperate coach who honestly has no idea what he's doing.
I mean, he said it at the end of the Maryland game, right? He doesn't know what to do, and he's been saying it after every single game when they lose, is that they're just one play away, and they have that one play that they miss out on. I mean, Miller Moss, he did throw 3 interceptions last game.
Yeah.
But for me, like, nothing really changes. Like, I know Maiava had a really good year last year at UNLV, so, like, there's a possibility of him being better, but I don't think your issue here is the quarterback. I think your issue is an offensive line that is not very good at blocking, which normally those should be pretty good at. And you also have an issue with throwing the ball 50 times a game, right? Like, you should be trusting your run game more. But Lincoln Riley is used to having Heisman caliber quarterbacks who can save him at the end of the day. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's a desperation to save his job. His buyout is huge. We'll talk about that at the end of the show when we get to hot seats and stuff like that. But I mean, like, I feel like this is Lincoln Riley knowing that things are getting hot, and he's trying to find something to do to change that makes it look like he is trying to win to the fans and to everybody else. And a quarterback change is kind of the easiest thing to do that, because he doesn't want to fire either of his coordinators or anything like that. He already fired Alex Grinch, right? He already did the thing where fire a coordinator, we're not winning, hire a new one and things will be fixed. Guess what? Things still aren't fixed. USC's defense is better this year, but still not. I mean, it's like 4th, I would say bottom 4 in the Big Ten, maybe bottom 5. Like, so I don't know. I wouldn't say it's like a desperation move, but it's definitely him trying to show that he's changing things and just trying to do anything he can to win these games, because right now he can't find a way to do it.
Yeah. I have an idea. Don't throw the ball 50 times a game.
Well, yeah.
That I
And
mean
Woody
that
Marks was running it well last game. Like, that's the crazy
yeah.
thing. Like, he was running it well last game.
Yeah.
But
I here random question, then I know we got to move on, but Miller Moss, Indiana quarterback next year?
Julian Lewis, Indiana quarterback this year.
Well, if
I
they don't
mean,
get if they don't get Julian Lewis.
yeah. I don't know if I see Indiana or anybody else touching him. I feel like he would probably go to like an ACC. I could see it kind of like a Kyle
That's
McCord
fair.
situation where he finds a home in the ACC or maybe the Big 12 or something like that, with a new head coach who, wants to get an experienced veteran quarterback that maybe had a harder time. So yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
John. I'd rather have Tavian than Miller
That's
Moss.
fair. That's a really good point. I'd forgotten about Taven for a minute, but
Yeah.
that's a good point.
I put a poll in the chat, and only 3 votes. If you're in the chat, vote on it. 2 people said yes, Lincoln Riley has benched Miller Moss to try and save his job, but 1 person said no. So I'll leave it up there so other people can vote as we move on, and we'll come back to it if we need to. Philip says Signetti only likes transfer up guys. Bring guys up from the G5.
That's a
That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a little bit of a dig at Miller too, but a little bit.
All right, Zach, let's talk about some games here. So we got 3 games we're going to kind of rifle through pretty quick. The Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State games. I think that those, are pretty high, what's it called? Spreads and stuff. But Penn State a little bit closer than the other 2, so that one might take some more time. But then we have some closer games we'll get into after that. So Ohio State, Purdue, Zach. Ohio State is favored in this one by 38 points. The over/under is 53.5. Ryan Day said in his press conference that he does have a good amount of respect for Purdue. The quarterback's been playing better lately, and he doesn't want to overlook the opponent. Everything he should be saying, but I think at the end of the day, we all know this is a team that Ohio State should destroy. Are they going to destroy them, or do you foresee another slow start, another slow game here, Zach?
I think this is going to be a demolition in the first half, and then you will see a lot of backups in the second half. No slow start. I think Travion goes over 100 in this game.
I could see both running backs going over 100.
Yeah, I think both could. I think Travion has not had like his big game yet. I think Quinshon will have some good runs too, but I like Travion to have 2 or 3 touchdowns in this game. And then I think they get the starters out by the third quarter. I've got 45-3.
Yeah, I got 48-6 in this one. I think that, this is what you want to see as an Ohio State fan. You want to see the juice carry over from the Penn State game. That was probably the most excitement and passion and emotion that you saw out of an Ohio State team under Ryan Day in at least the past few years. And so the question now is, can they keep that going, or did they use up all of that in one game? I don't think they did. I think this is a team that's determined to win and do it by a large margin. So, like I said, I'm going to go with Ohio State, 48-6. Don't think they get a touchdown. Just think they get a couple field goals. John says 56-7. So, anything else on that one before we move on, Zach?
Yeah, Cameron said Purdue pass defense is bad. Purdue is just bad. Like, they're bad everywhere. Ohio State doesn't, like, they could throw all over them. They don't need to throw on them. Like, that's how bad they are. Just go back to the Notre Dame game.
You thought Zach hated Indiana. Just wait till he starts talking about Purdue.
Listen, I don't hate Purdue. But they stink.
Yeah.
Like, they almost stink as bad as the NCAA does. That's how bad they stink this year.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
It's
pretty bad. Cameron says Ryan Walters' funeral game. Yeah. That could definitely see that. We'll talk more when we get to the hot seat coaches. Don't worry. All right, Zach, let's move on to Oregon, Maryland. I feel like we've seen this game two of the last 3 weeks. I feel like we saw Oregon take care of business. Maryland, God bless your soul, even traveling to Autzen in this game.
Oh,
Billy Edwards Jr. and Ty Felton are going to try to do something, but at the end of the day, basketball season has started. The critics will not be as loud in Maryland, and Oregon will win this game 38-7, if not higher. Zach, what do you think?
I I I think Maryland gets a couple of junk scores, maybe in the second half, just because I like Ty Felton and Prather, like they've got good receivers. I've got 52-17 though. I think it's a murder in the first half, and then Oregon kind of, they do their thing. But Maryland's defense is just so hot and cold that I think Oregon might score more in the first half than you expect, and then so
Mm-hmm.
I've got 52-17.
Cameron says, "What happened to the Terps? They just seem so bad." October happened. That's a.
I was gonna say Mike Loxley happened, but
I mean, this is
both are
vintage
true.
Mike Loxley, right? Like he
Yeah.
he wins his out of conference games, and then he gets into the conference, and he even got into the conference early this year against Michigan State, and he lost that one, and then he went back and he beat two ACC teams, and then he comes back to the conference and he starts losing again. So,
Yeah.
I mean, at a certain point, like coaches show you often enough, he might change it one time, but this is just kind of who Mike Loxley is, right?
Yeah.
So,
He is who he is. I
uh,
I
Rodess
I
is saying, I'm pulling for the Maryland miracle. It would definitely be a miracle, Rodess.
listen, Northwestern scored 37 on him. Like, what do we think Oregon's gonna do?
I do think that Oregon will not eclipse 40 just because of what they've done in the past. I do think that they do kind of let up and they do just kind of coast from there, so that way they don't get their players hurt and stuff like that. So I don't think they'll put up 40 or 50 on them unless Maryland just makes a bunch of mistakes. So
DK, don't do that. DK, you don't want me. You don't want me as president.
listen, last time DK we brought up politics on this show. We started opening up a can we don't want to open up. So
Yeah, yeah. But I
um
appreciate the sentiment.
yes,
But
thank you.
yeah.
John says, "Is Tez Johnson playing?" No, it sounds like he will be back. When he posted that picture, I thought it made sound like he was out for the year, but I heard a report today said that he could be
Yeah,
back as early as the Big Ten championship game, but he should be back no later than the playoffs. So,
yeah,
one of those situations where
yeah,
he's in recovery. He changed his Instagram
yeah.
picture to who was it? Goku in the recovery chamber. So, you
Nice.
know,
I'll just say back to the 40-50 points. I'll just ask this question and then we can move on. Um, I know that Oregon typically lets up, but like are we not sure that Maryland's incompetence would allow them to score 40 and 50 even with third stringers in?
yeah, I mean, like their defense could definitely get some pick sixes or something like that, and we could get a touchdown pass from Dante Moore later on or something like that. I mean, that could definitely happen. I just know the way Oregon has operated the
Yeah.
past few weeks. It didn't happen against Purdue. It didn't happen against who was the other team that they played before? Michigan. Um, but it doesn't matter. It didn't happen
Illinois.
against either of those
Illinois.
two teams.
Illinois.
Illinois, and Illinois is a better team than Maryland, but
That's
still,
fair.
like
That's fair.
it didn't happen against either of those teams. So I think Oregon just gets the lead and sits on it.
Yep. That's fair.
So
That's fair.
we'll see. All right, Zach, one more, and then we'll hit a commercial break. Washington goes to Penn State, the whiteout game on Peacock. What the heck?
Yeah. Somebody needs to go to go to Penn State, like to train them to say no.
Well,
Like,
and like, has any team been screwed over by the TV contracts and stuff more than Penn State?
no. I mean,
Like,
they've
in
they've
all
been
of college
screwed over
football,
a
though,
lot.
not just the Big Ten, like all of college football. Has anybody even screwed over more? I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yeah.
Penn State has to
It's
play
bad.
their biggest games at noon. They have they have one of, if not the best home field advantages in the Big Ten, but they have to play their big games at noon. It's just like, what are we doing?
Yeah. So my thought in this game, I'm actually very nervous for Penn State. And the reason is not anything statistical and much more the history of Penn State after Ohio State under James Franklin. They
Which
have
is
so if you go back, I think 2017 after they lost to Ohio State by 1 point, they lost to Michigan State. Did the same thing in 2018. They lost, I believe, right after that. They just do not perform well. Now, that being said, Cameron's comment is why I think Penn State wins. I don't think they cover. I think it's a low scoring game. I think both teams make a lot of mistakes. I've got 21-17 Penn State.
oh wow, yeah, you have them scoring less than I do. Yes, Dylan, we are talking football. It's still football season, and not the past 7 weeks. Come on, you were just doing the preview 3 weeks ago for basketball season. I know you've been looking at basketball the last 7 weeks because of Purdue, but um, yeah. So I think Washington did show against USC. They do have a legit pass defense. I do think that there was the question there about the passing games they had played against, or the passing offenses they had played against. But USC has been a good passing offense this year. They threw the ball 50 times. Washington picked them off 3 times. They only scored 21 points. So I do think that there's definitely an aspect to Washington's pass defense, but I'm with you. I don't see Washington being able to stop this duo of Allen and Singleton. I know some people are probably going to be down on them after what Ohio State did, but that's also Ohio State's run defense. Like, Washington doesn't have Ohio State's run defense. So for me, I can't see Penn State's running backs having another bad game. And even if they do, I think that James Franklin is going to go to Andy Kotelnicki and be like, dude, get Tyler Warren involved. Like, he was not nearly involved enough last game. We have to work that out. We have to figure out what we're doing for that. And at the end of the day, we also have to remember who this Washington team is. They're undisciplined. They have tons of penalties. We really think in a whiteout game, they're going to be penalty free and play well enough to win? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so at all. I think Washington could have upwards of 10 penalties in this game, and it could be getting even worse for them. All kinds of false starts, all kinds of holding penalties or whatever in the secondary. It's not going to be a good look for Washington. And then at the end of the day, Zach, every single defensive line that Washington has faced that's been good, Indiana, Michigan, Iowa, 3 sacks or more on Will Rogers. 10 sacks combined in those 3 games. Penn State's got a really good pass rushing defensive line. Pretty good run stopping too. I don't want to take away credit for that, but pass rushing is their strength on the defensive line.
Agreed.
And I can see Will Rogers going down 3-4 times in this one.
Yeah.
So I've got Penn State 31-14. I could see a sack or something like that adds to it, and that's how they get to 30.
I think that's a good thought. It was interesting looking at Washington from a score perspective, and I was shocked that they've only gotten over 30 points twice, and it was Weber State and Eastern Michigan. They have been under 20, I think, over half their games. And so, you would think with their offensive personnel, they'd be able to put up more points. But, they just have been abysmal particularly in their discipline. And I think that, though, your thought about the whiteout, I just am concerned that Penn State will have similar issues throwing the ball that they had. Washington's defense is not as good as Ohio State's by far, but I
think they will have trouble throwing the ball, but I think Bo Prabula will get in this game much more. I think Tyler Warren will be utilized much more. So I'm not expecting a 200+ yard passing game from Drew Aller. Honestly, I could see him only throwing the ball maybe 12 or 15 times, but I could just see a really good running game and the field position battle. I could see Penn State just dominating the field position battle, and that's really helping them to score.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. That's good.
Philip says 21-3 Penn State. I don't think I'm missing any more score predictions here. Road Dust says, I'm hoping for a Washington whooping. It could happen. Could happen, but I don't think so. Can you believe Washington got votes for the top 25 last week?
Don't, yeah, don't
They
get
got
me
votes and
started.
Minnesota didn't. I don't know. It's 5-4, and you get votes to be in the top 25.
I
It's
think
just
I think every year we need to go through the AP, like everybody has an AP vote, and basically like half of you are losing your vote because of sheer stupidity. Like we're just whoever has the worst, and I don't know how we figure that out because it's all subjective anyway. But it's like I just think we
well, what
got to
needs to
figure out.
happen? What needs to happen is they need to get the same number of AP voters from each conference, and
Yeah.
every voter needs to nominate 10 teams to be
Hmm.
voted upon. And because of conference like conference belief and stuff like that, there's gonna be a few teams in there like in Iowa, whatever else that they nominate. Not your top 10, but your 10 teams you would nominate to be in the top 25. There's like
Yeah.
40 poll voters. You're going to get more than just 10 teams to put in there. And then you know what? If you get less than 25, you don't have 25. It's okay.
Mhm.
You don't have to
Yeah.
have exactly 25 because some teams just don't deserve to be in it, you know? So, all right, everybody, we'll be right back. We're going to do a commercial and then we'll come back. We'll talk Minnesota Rutgers. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minnesota Sports, former college coach Zack Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we do want to remind you to like and subscribe. We definitely appreciate that. Helps other people see the show more and helps us to, maybe gain more of an audience and get it to be more popular and make sure that we're fighting against the SEC bias. Who knows? Maybe an
Mhm.
AP pollster watches this and he's like, oh my gosh, my life has changed. The Big Ten is so much better than I ever thought. And the SEC is, everybody's been biased toward them. And then we're changing the world. So,
Amen.
you know, vote Big Ten Huddle with your 2024. Anyway,
Mm.
uh,
Roads,
Minnesota.
roads, roads in Guggenheim, 24.
There we go. Minnesota at Rutgers. Minnesota is favored by 6 in this one. Rutgers is coming off a bye, so there is the possibility of, some extra prep time for Greg Schiano, who was tight-lipped about injuries in his press conference, so he was not talking about that
Yeah.
very much. There are some interesting storylines in this one, Zach. I think most people are writing this game off as not really much to think about, but you think about Kurt Soraka coming over from
Mhm.
Minnesota, Corey Heatherman coming over from Rutgers. I mean, there's some neat storylines in this game of different players. Athan Kaliakmanis, his old team, playing against them. I think there's some really neat storylines in this one. Obviously, we're going to give more analysis than storylines here, but I mean, what's your thoughts overall on the game? Maybe mention some of those storylines and then get into some of your analysis of what you think will go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting because like on one hand, I don't think there's any like ill will from Kaliak Manis and certainly not ill will from Kurt Soraka. I think obviously Kaliak Manis, he knew he had to move on from Minnesota, but it allowed him to reunite with his old offensive coordinator. And I think, Kaliak Manis is I think who we thought he was. I think there have been times he's been maybe a little better, but overall, I think we've said this multiple times. His goal was never to be a life-changing quarterback for Rutgers. His role was to be game manager, be able to be smart with the football. And if you saw Gavin Wims at Kentucky this past Saturday, you know what happened. He kind of threw the game away, literally. So Ethan Kaliakmanis is kind of the game manager who can throw a few nice passes. He's in a better system for him, back with his old offensive coordinator. And I think because of that, Minnesota got the guy that they really wanted, which was Max Brosmer. And so I think it is very interesting because on one hand, I think Brosmer is one of the most underrated guys in the Big Ten, if not the country, at quarterback. But I think Rutgers has the guy that they really believe in, at least to help carry their team. But it hasn't worked out super well. A lot of that I don't think is Kaliak Manis's fault. I think it's injuries to the offensive line, injuries to the defense. Like this is supposed to be a defensive laden team, and they've just been in. Starting with THUR. Like even though that was preseason, that injury I think set the tone for kind of the descent that Rutgers has had, and so I think that has really colored it. It's this game in terms of projecting it. I think is hard because I think the question in my mind is what Rutgers team do we get after the bye? Like, does Shiano have a way to rally the troops to get them to chop once more? It's at home, and while I really believe in Minnesota, Minnesota's not that much greater that they are immune from an upset. And as much as I think PJ Fleck can have his moments, he's stubbed his toe a few times. And so I think those are a couple questions for me on both sides. Like, what's the health of Rutgers and do they believe again? Because I think that's a big part of this is do they have confidence and are they getting healthy? On the other side, Minnesota has looked really good over the past few weeks, but PJ Fleck has been prone to stub his toe. And so is this one of those games where maybe they're like, "Oh yeah, like they're feeling themselves a little bit, especially after a big win, first win over Brett Bielema. Are they feeling themselves a little bit and does that really hurt them going into this game?"
Yeah, I think that PJ Fleck is going to keep these guys focused. This seems like a Minnesota team that's very on track with trying to right the wrongs from earlier they had in the year, North Carolina, Michigan, and the likes like that. My biggest concern with Minnesota in this game is actually the tackling, because you look at what Minnesota has done against the best running backs they've had on their schedule, which, Zach, tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe the best running backs they had on their schedule were Amari Hampton, Caleb Johnson, and Khalil Mullins.
Yep.
They had in those games 20 missed tackles against North Carolina, 13 missed tackles against Iowa, and 14 missed tackles against Michigan. They
Yep.
they lost all three of those games. Those are all three of their losses, and those are all against very good running backs. Now, I think all of those offensive lines were set up better than Rutgers is right now.
Mhm.
So, and we don't really know because Greg Schiano was being tight-lipped about the injury report. We didn't get an injury report last year, so we'll see what this offensive line for Rutgers looks like. But at the end of the day, this to me is the game. Illinois was to a certain extent. Illinois was definitely a big statement game, a ranked win. But this
Mhm.
to me is the game where Minnesota truly does right their wrongs that they had earlier on in the season. The missed tackles, being run all over by
Mhm.
Hampton, Khalil Mullins, Caleb Johnson, those kind of guys, and being able to
Yeah.
say, hey, Rutgers, you might have one of the best running backs in the nation in Kyle Monangai. He might run for 100 yards in this one and a touchdown or two, but he's not going to run all over us. We're not going to be missing tackles left and right. And we're going to make sure that we get him down to the ground and don't let him pick up easy first downs. If Minnesota
Yeah.
can do that, I believe they can. I think that this Minnesota team has gotten better. I believe they can. And I think that Rutgers does have the questions on the offensive line. But for me, that's going to be the main thing I'm looking at because it is a disadvantage that Minnesota has had earlier on in the year, and it's their opportunity to fix that.
Yep. Yeah, and I think Monangai has been great. And I think he's still one of the best running backs in the conference. I think it really hurts that Sam Brown's hurt for the year because he could really give some relief. And Kyle Monangai, like he needs help. And like the receivers, they've definitely improved in the receiver room, but like Ian Strong, Demir Miller, Christian Dremel, they're good complementary pieces, but none of them are going to be able to take the pressure off of Monangai. And I like having Brown, I think would have been helpful just as a guy who could be a change of pace back, give Monangai a breather. I think the difference is like you look at Minnesota, they have a full complement of playmakers on both sides of the ball. And to me, that's the main difference in this is I'm like, who are Rutgers playmakers? Well, the only one we know that's healthy is Monangai. Like a lot of their other playmakers are hurt. Ja Joyner has been a stud. Justin Wally, Coy Parrish. I mean, that's just the defensive side of the ball. And then you talk about the offensive side of the ball. You've got Darius Taylor. You have Major. You have Daniel Jackson. And you have a playmaker in Max Brosmer. Like that's 7, 8 guys who you're like, those are high-level players who can make plays, which is why I am concerned legitimately when Minnesota plays Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Because Minnesota actually has guys on both sides of the ball that can wreck a game.
Right.
And Rutgers has one of those. Minnesota has 7 or 8. Right. And to me, that's the difference in this game for me. And so I like Minnesota. I have them 24-13. I think it's lower scoring, but I think Minnesota gets it done in Piscataway.
Interesting. Yeah, I think this one will be a little bit higher scoring. I think that Max Brosmer is going to have a good game against this Rutgers secondary. I think Daniel Jackson could go over 100 yards receiving in this one, maybe a touchdown or two. But for me, the thing that is really going to solidify this one for Minnesota, I think they're going to get turnovers. They've been +9 in the turnover margin the past 4 games. They've been on this winning streak. And so if they can keep that up, which, I mean, I think Kaliakmanis is not the most accurate quarterback in the world. So if you can get Justin Wally, Coy Parrish, these guys, I mean, Coy Parrish right now is leading the Big Ten in interceptions with 5. So if these guys can get some interceptions and turn the ball over, maybe get some fumbles, maybe a strip sack on Kaliakmanis or something like that, I think that's going to be huge for him. I do think that Kyle Monangai has a good day. I think that Minnesota continues with the missed tackles and stuff. Not to the level of what they had against North Carolina. I don't think they're going to have 20 missed tackles, but I could see them getting over 10 in this one. But the defense steps up when they need to. And like I said, they get a pick 6 or they get an interception or they get a strip sack that sets up the offense in a good position or something like that. And then you see Minnesota taking advantage of those opportunities. I'm going to say Minnesota in this one 31-21. Like I said, a little bit higher scoring, but I could see a good day from Monangai, 3 touchdowns, 2 or 3 touchdowns, 150 yards or something like that. But at the end of the day, the turnovers are just too much.
I'll just say, do you know how many times Minnesota has scored over 30 points this season?
It's twice, right?
Yep. Yeah. 48 against Maryland and 48
against Rhode Island. Right?
Yeah. So that's not to say I think what you said I think could happen. I'm just hesitant, especially on the road. But I think the way they would get there would be a defensive score. So I think that's good on you.
Yeah. Or even if it's not a defensive score, I think some kind of turnover to put them in better field position to get there.
That's good.
I really believe in this Minnesota offense. I think that they have a good O-line. I don't know if it's an elite O-line, but I think it's a good O-line. I think Darius Taylor is a very good running back. Max Brosmer is a good quarterback. He has good weapons. Daniel Jackson on the outside being the main one of those good weapons. And I think they have more firepower than Rutgers has now on defense. So, yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Let's get through a few comments. Sorry, guys. I normally go through the comments before my prediction. Philip says, does Athan Kaliakmanis want some antidote from Fleck? I don't know. Would Fleck give him the antidote, or would he swap it for some kind of poison? The confidence poison or something.
He would give it to him after the game.
Oh, yeah.
For next week.
Who do they play next week?
Who does Rutgers play next week? They play Maryland. Yeah, give him some antidote so they can beat Mike Loxley.
Well, they play Illinois. Yeah,
wait,
say, hey,
Illinois.
save this for when you play Illinois after Maryland.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, half for Maryland. Actually, no, a third for Maryland and 2/3 for Illinois.
Hey, my wife loves half and halves. A little bit
Nice.
of Arnold Palmer, you know.
There you go. There you go.
Philip says B minus Minnesota game still gets them the win over Rutgers. Yeah, yeah. I don't think Minnesota needs to come out and play their best game. I think they
Yeah.
have enough firepower, and Rutgers unfortunately is just a little
Yeah.
too banged up. Jeremy says I think Minnesota wants to win this one. Many guys on each staff came from the other team. I think both teams are going to want to win this one. Yeah, I think both teams are going to want to win it pretty bad, and I think when both of them want it pretty bad, I have to go with the team with more playmakers, and
Mhm.
that's Minnesota. It's not always been Minnesota in some of these games, but that's
Yeah.
Minnesota. I can't pronounce this name. He says, "Have you already done IU?" Nope. IU is last. We will save them for last today. They are the special game against Michigan. Jeremy also says Minnesota does struggle with run D. I'm confident Minnesota's ability to cover Rutgers wide receivers, Cal Manus, isn't a difference maker. You know, I did say that early on in the year that Minnesota struggled with run D, but part of it is also they just faced really good running backs. Like
Yeah.
it's the opposite of Washington, where Washington has just faced really bad quarterbacks,
Yeah.
so they look better. You know, not many teams in the country have faced as many good running backs as Minnesota has. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think
Um,
if I'm correct, I think Omarion Hampton is uh most people see him as a first round NFL draft pick.
yeah. He had a fantastic year last year. Was a little overshadowed by Ollie Gordon, but he had a fantastic year last year, and yeah, he's continuing to do so this year as well.
Yeah. He's really
John
really
says
good.
28-10 Minnesota, so nearly 30, and then Jeremy says 21-10 Minnesota. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the next game here, Zach. We have Iowa at UCLA. Iowa is favored by 5.5 in this one. Iowa is preparing to face a revitalized UCLA offense that has been quite better the past 2 weeks, scoring 27 against Nebraska, who has a very good defense. So that is a good accomplishment for them. And then 35 against Rutgers, getting up there in the 30s. Ethan Garbers has been fantastic these past 2 games, doing much better. They still don't have a run game, so I mean, Ethan Garbers was still the leading rusher last game. Who knows? He might take over that again
Yep.
for the team. But overall, UCLA very good quarterback the past couple weeks. Iowa coming in with not much quarterback depth. In fact, the walk-on quarterback is going to be the backup behind Brendan Sullivan with this one, with
Mm.
Lanes being injured still, and then Cade McNamara is not even traveling. He is still in the concussion, kind of gray
Wow.
zone there. So he's not even traveling for this one. Zach, what are your thoughts on this game?
Sagarin is not everything, but Sagarin has Iowa 16th in the country.
Caleb
Rank,
Johnson, I'm telling you.
rank Iowa, you cowards. But in all seriousness,
I wonder where ESPN FPI has him. I'm gonna look at that real fast.
it's
Go
it's
ahead.
high. I think I'm pretty sure it's. It's a good question.
Go ahead. I'll look it up while you talk.
But I think this is all about Caleb Johnson. Um, I think Iowa's defense will limit UCLA. I don't think they'll completely contain UCLA, but I do think Iowa will limit UCLA's offense. And I think Caleb Johnson has another big day. And I think they control the game, they control the clock, they limit opportunities for the Bruin offense. I will say this game is more interesting than I thought it had any right to be because of UCLA's improvement. But at the end of the day, this is going to sound crazy. I don't see how UCLA's defense stops the run game for Iowa. So
I mean, their run defense has been okay this year, but yeah, with Brendan Sullivan as a quarterback, no, I don't see it happening.
I think with Brendan Sullivan, that's the key thing. UCLA has been okay, but I'm trying to remember what rushing attacks that they faced that UCLA has faced. I know they faced Iowa, which is pretty good. Nebraska's like they're not
Right.
great. So I'm doing a lot of
UCLA has
looking.
faced Indiana's rushing attack, LSU, Oregon, Penn State, Minnesota, Rutgers, Nebraska. So Yeah, Oregon really good, Penn State really good, Minnesota really good,
Yeah.
LSU pretty good. They have a
Yeah.
really good offensive line, and then Indiana really good. So
Yeah.
they've
I
faced some pretty good ones, but they haven't stopped any of them.
yeah, they haven't stopped, but yeah, I'm feeling a little less optimistic about my pick though as we're talking about this. Cuz I do think I think that what's hard is I'm like my perception of UCLA from preseason has colored my thoughts about them a little bit. But like I've been impressed by UCLA the past couple weeks. And I know part of it is like Nebraska hasn't played well and Rutgers hasn't played well. But they're making it interesting for me. And like they played LSU tough. So like I really like the trajectory. That's the word. The trajectory of UCLA. But going back to Iowa, I do think the running attack with Brendan Sullivan, with Caleb Johnson, I just think it's going to be too much. I've got 31-20
Yeah.
Iowa.
I take back what I said about UCLA not stopping the run against Minnesota. Darius Taylor did only have 30 yards in that game, and Marcus Major did only have 18. So they did do a good job of stopping the run in that game. Iowa is ranked 20th in FPI.
Okay.
They are a 12 grade, which there's less than 30 teams that are 10 or more in college football right now. They're actually above Iowa State, Kansas State, Colorado, Missouri, Oklahoma, BYU. They're over them as well. So yeah, there's a number of teams in here that they have a better FPI score than. And I apologize. I said Michigan was 4-5 earlier. They are 5-4 when I said that. Yeah, so I think Brendan Sullivan here is the main thing that's going to help the rushing attack for Iowa and not let UCLA basically do what Michigan State did, where they just basically said, "You're not going to run on us. You have to pass on us to win." And Cade McNamara did it for one drive, and that was it. I think that Brendan Sullivan, his playmaking ability with his legs, his ability to throw the ball, I think he's going to open it up quite a bit in this one. I think UCLA, like I said, it's been better, but I have some kind of like fool's gold concern with UCLA, kind of like what we saw from Wisconsin a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Like UCLA beat Rutgers and they had a really good game, and then they beat Nebraska and they had a really good game. Like Nebraska's offense was kind of looking suspect the past
Yep.
2 weeks against
Yep.
Ohio State and against and against IU. And then this game against UCLA, they continue to look suspect. They didn't bounce back. They did only score 27 against Nebraska, but like I said, that's a good Nebraska defense, I think, that they scored 27 on and looked better against. So Phillips says UCLA sneaky bowl team. I don't think so just because of the schedule. They do
Yeah.
have the opportunity with Fresno State and USC at the end of the year. I guess maybe. Iowa would be hard to win, but at Washington, USC, Fresno State, what do you think, Zach?
It's more possible than I would have ever thought preseason. Like none of those games are like there's no way.
Right.
I
Iowa's
but I
probably the most no way.
Yeah. And even that, like there is like Iowa has to travel to get there on a Friday. So like and it's a 9 p.m. start
Yeah.
Eastern. Although it's 8 p.m. Eastern for them for Central Time. So I don't think that's actually that bad, but it's still I would agree. I think Iowa's probably the most it's definitely the game that I'm like, they're probably not winning that game. But the other three, like Fresno State's not as good as I thought they'd be. USC, despite being loved by the computers, they're ranked 17th in FPI, by the way. That's just
Yeah.
stupid.
Josh Pate has him 17th on his like
JP
Pate
poll.
ratings or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. The computers love USC. Like Sagarin has them 7.
That's because every game is close. You don't really take that much of a loss when you're like Rico Wright says, a play away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're right, Philip. They only have to go 3-1. My biggest thing is they've only won 3 games so far this season. So, and that was a comeback win over Hawaii and a win against Rutgers and Nebraska. Now, both of those were on the road, but granted, struggling teams at the time. So I'm not saying I I don't completely buy it. Obviously, there's the possibility there, but I mean, you're talking 3 straight wins at the end of the year against at Washington, USC, and Fresno State. I think they have a good chance of winning all 3 of those games.
Yeah.
But winning all 3 of those, like each game individually, they have a good chance of winning each game. But for 3 straight weeks, I just, Ethan Garber is going to have to continue to be really, really good the entire time, which he could be. So it could happen. I wouldn't bet on it. If you're asking for betting advice, Philip, I would say no. Don't bet on it.
I will say, though, if UCLA gets one more, like, I already think their season has been a success with 3 wins because that schedule it's the hardest schedule in the country, according to Sagarin. And I think we had them at 1 or 2 wins total. If they have 4 or even 5, I know we've given a lot of junk to Deshaun Foster, but he deserves a lot of credit if they get to 4 or 5 wins.
Yeah, no, they do for sure. I think we gave them 1 or 2 wins in the preseason, like you said, and so if they can get to 4 or 5, and if they get to 4 or 5, they'll have 3-4 wins in the Big Ten off of that. When you're playing Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, Minnesota, and Iowa, it's pretty impressive when you get to 3 or 4 wins in the Big Ten. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think for you at UCLA, I guess not unfortunately, I'm not really rooting for either team in this one, but I don't think UCLA is going to get the win in this one, even though Iowa is coming short and they are traveling so far. I do think that is in UCLA's favor, but I am going to give this a really close game. I think UCLA playing better, but Sebastian Castro being back for Iowa, I think this is the best defense that Ethan Garbers is going to see in the past few weeks, and he probably will have a little bit of a hard time throwing in this one, but I think ultimately there's something that happens here, a safety, multiple field goals by Iowa, something like that pushes them over the top, and I think Iowa's going to win this one 26-24.
Ooh, that is a
close one. Close one.
Yeah.
What did you give your score prediction?
31-20.
That's right.
20.
Okay.
Yep.
UCLA, like Minnesota, is improving clearly. Yes, they totally are. Yeah.
Agreed.
And Deshaun Foster deserves a lot of credit for that. All right. I think that's all we got on them. All right, Zach, we are going to hit a commercial break really fast, and then we'll come back and we will talk about the Indiana-Michigan game. So stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back. The Big Ten Huddle is brought to you by the College Huddle, the largest fan-led college sports podcast community on the internet. With contributors from 70 different schools, you will get in all kinds of analysis from all over the country. Go visit thecollegehuddle.com to find your team and read articles from all across so many fans and contributors. The College Huddle is fan-made, fan-driven, and fan-fueled. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we want to thank everybody for being here. We do want to ask, if you like basketball, go check out our basketball channel. We have that as well starting up this year. I did some game recaps last night of Ohio State, Michigan, and Purdue. If you ever want a certain game recap or anything, it's going to be a little bit different with how the basketball season works. I'll probably be doing most of the game recaps on my own and then just talking kind of general Big Ten stuff in the podcast episodes. But if you ever want a game recap, just get in the comment section of one of those videos, let me know, and I can work on that for you. Try to let me know before the game so I make sure I catch that one. Right now, it's a little hard to catch every single game with everything going on, but definitely go over to the Big Ten Huddle basketball channel and watch some stuff over there. Zach, we have Indiana at home facing the defending national champions, Michigan. Over under in this one is 48.5. Indiana is favored by 14 points. Indiana, I am struggling to find a way that Indiana loses this game. Zach, I went into this specifically thinking, okay, I'm going to find as many avenues as I can for Michigan to win this game. The avenues that I found mostly consist of Indiana not playing well. There's not really an avenue I can find where Michigan just outplays Indiana, which is tough for a Michigan team to swallow that won the national championship last year. But I think if we're being honest about this team, and if we're being honest about this Indiana team, this is where these two programs are at. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the way It's funny. I similarly, because I think I went into analyzing this game thinking, I think Michigan might give Indiana problems. And I think their defensive line could give them problems. I don't know if any other unit on their team can. And that's like, I think the running backs could have like some success at times. But man, Davis
Maybe
Warren,
Mullins, but Edwards.
yeah, like maybe
If they give the
Mullings.
ball to Edwards, he's gonna fumble it eventually.
Yeah. But I'm like, aside from Colston Loveland, what playmaker do they have on offense that you're like, oh, they're gonna give Indiana some trouble?
Not
Like,
really anybody. I mean, they've had a few wide receivers pop up here and there and get some
yeah,
good catches, but there's not anybody consistently for Michigan that's going to do anything to this
yeah.
Indiana secondary.
And then I don't think Will Johnson is playing. Has there been any confirmation about
Dude, I don't
that?
think he's playing all year.
Yeah, I mean that's my feel
They're
too.
5-4. I'm surprised Michigan hasn't bowl banned themselves already yet.
Yeah, well, it's something's coming. Something's coming.
Yeah.
But like I just look at their secondary is not very good.
No, Philip, we're not doing that.
No, definitely not.
With the way it sounds like Pennsylvania with their stuff, we could be here for weeks, man.
It's our bad. Our bad in PA.
Zack, come on, go fix it.
No, I'm going to bed. I'm going to bed.
I'm sorry, that was such a funny comment. I had to bring it up. Continue.
It's great. It's great. But like it's not just that Indiana has a couple of good receivers. They have several. Like Surratt is awesome. Cooper he's averaging 22 yards a catch. Price is good. Cross is good. Like there's a reason why McCauley transferred, right? Like, because they have a lot of good receivers. You've got two good running backs. The line is good. And I look at the defense for Michigan and I'm like, you can only pass rush and be good on the front without help for so long. And so I tried to find I tried to find pathways and I'm like, honestly, and this is not meant to be a dig at Indiana by any means. Indiana feels like a slightly lesser version than Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen the full version yet because we haven't seen the big game yet,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they could be the same version of Oregon. We need to see it in a big game, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you line them up athletically and you say, okay, NFL draft, Oregon's athletes are better.
Oh yeah.
But in terms of being a complete team,
right. Playing together, discipline, juice, working together, coaching. I mean, all those things. Honestly, like those things, Indiana might be the best in the Big Ten in a lot of those areas. And those are the kind of intangible things that you can use to get over the talent gap and win games. I personally think once we get to the NFL stuff, some of these players that are showing out really well right now and aren't getting kind of the NFL draft respect are going to start getting it more once we get to the combine. And if they show up really well against Ohio State and in the playoffs, you'll start seeing it even more after that as well, because these guys, like I said, they've played really well against not so good teams. But once they do something really good against a very good team, people are going to be like, whoa, this team has more talent than we thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I say lesser than Oregon, I think there's clearly some NFL dudes on this Indiana squad. So, but I think so. Anyway, my point in saying that is I saw what Oregon did to Michigan, and granted, I thought Michigan had opportunities in that game, but Oregon controlled that game. Like they controlled it. If they don't turn the ball over, like it's not nearly as close at half. Well, it wasn't even close at half, but it was 21-10 at one point. Without the turnover, it's not that. And I just don't think Indiana's going to turn the ball over. It's at home. I think it might be closer going into But then I think Indiana makes some adjustments and pulls away. I've got 34-17 Indiana over Michigan.
I mean, I could see it being a little bit close at halftime because maybe Michigan's defense does come out and they have a really good start to the game or something like that. But I think I'm with you in the second half. Indiana, no matter what, starts to pull ahead in this one. When I was looking at this game, there is just nothing that I can point to other than Michigan's defensive line making Indiana's offensive line look fraudulent, which I don't think they are. I think Indiana is one of the best offensive lines in the country right now. But other than that, there is no way that Michigan can even stay in this game. Indiana's defense, they got 7 sacks in the last game. O-line's Michigan's O-line is not very good in pass protection at all. Like, you're going to drop Davis Warren back, and he's going to have pressure on him every single time, and that's going to be with Indiana sending 4, maybe 3, right? Like, they are not going to have to be blitzing, so they're going to have guys in coverage the entire game. Indiana also blocked a punt and forced a fumble or a muff punt last game as well. So you're talking about a special teams unit that has been really good this season versus a Michigan special teams unit that hasn't been very good, because just point blank, this is not a well-coached Michigan team. This Michigan team is undisciplined. This Michigan team is not well coached. Last game, it's something as simple as don't line up over the center. And Oregon comes out with some fancy formation. What does he do? He lines up right over the center. It's like, dude, that is clear. That should be day one on special teams. Hey, if they come out and they only have a center out there, don't line up right over him. But no, of course, that's what he does, because this is just not a well-coached Michigan team. Michigan has good players who can do things, but they are not put in the position in order for them to be successful. Michigan's defense can't stop Indiana's red zone offense. I mean, my thought process, well, maybe they get Indiana to the red zone and maybe they stop them. Curtis Rourke is too accurate. The running game is too good. Like, Indiana is going to go on these long sustaining drives, and Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are going to be dogged when they get to the red zone, and they're not going to have the energy to be able to keep up with Justin Ellison and Tyson Lawton and these kind of guys. So, or Tyson Law. And at the end of the day, like, quite frankly, Indiana is just far better coached than Michigan. Kirk Cigneti, Shanahan, all these guys, they will find a way to just completely pick apart this Michigan defense. And it could be a little held up at the beginning because of Michigan's playmakers, but eventually coaching will take over, execution will take over, discipline will take over, and this Indiana team is going to win 38-10 at least, if not more.
Okay.
So
yeah, so we both have them covering.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's get to a few comments really fast. Dave says, I've been watching college football stuff all day. Keeps me distracted from the election. That's a good plan. I've been doing the same thing, Dave. I've been doing the same thing. John says, a lesser version of the number 1 team in the country. We'll take it. See, wasn't an insult. You're not an IU hater today, Zach. LFG, no Will Johnson, IU by 3+ touchdowns. Yeah. Even if they had Will Johnson, I pointed it out last episode, like, Will Johnson, his specialty, I'm not saying he's bad at it. I'm just saying it's not his specialty to guard guys over the middle. You know, if it's a slant route or something like that, sure, but that's not his specialty. You notice Michigan keeps Will Johnson outside the numbers a lot of times, or around the numbers, because that's where he's better at. Pons would be a first-round pick next year if he was 6'1" instead of 5'9". Yep. Yeah. And that's a lot of the issues for some of these Indiana players, is they just don't have the measurables in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I guess we probably should have been more specific when we said that instead of talent. Maybe we talked about some of the measurables.
Yeah.
For some of the
that's a really good point, John. Well, and I think, that's why a lot of these guys go to a place like JMU, is they're overlooked guys who are really good players, but like, they don't have the measurables they're looking for. It's interesting. I was leading Bible study over at Susquehanna University, which is a D3 school. They're the number 6 team in the country in Division III. And one of the guys there was a lineman, and he was telling me that the running backs on their team, both of them are 2 of the best athletes he's ever seen in terms of game speed. But he's like, they're short and they run a 4.5 instead of a 4.3. So that's why they're D3 players. And I was like, dang. And like that, I think that's the reality of group of 5 guys too. Like, sometimes you don't, like, you have a 5'9" corner who has every bit, like, of the physicality and speed at least from a game perspective. But because they run a 4.5 and they're 5'9" rather than 6 foot,
Yeah.
like you don't get looked at. And
Yeah.
like that's
That
why I
happens a
think
lot more in the NBA than it does the NFL. Pons will still get drafted. He just won't be a first round pick. Guys in the NBA literally wouldn't even get drafted. I think there's been like 3 players drafted in the NBA that's under 6'5" the past few
yeah.
years, which is just absolutely insane. But that's the way it is. But you're right. Like you have to have the measurables and then the speed or whatever on top of it, and makes it hard. Philip says, could this be a letdown game for Indiana?
No.
If there were certain areas that Michigan was better at, I would say it's possible. But like I said, there's this like Michigan can't even blitz them. Like Curtis Rourke is so good against the blitz. Even if Michigan were to try to blitz Curtis Rourke, he'd just get the ball out of there. He'd see it coming, and it'd be a 15, 20-yard gain. Like there is just no response that Michigan has for Indiana in this game. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You know, that's fine. But from what I've seen, I think anybody who's been evaluating football games this year in the Big Ten
Yeah.
could not tell you a single area that Michigan could, go against Indiana in this one. It has to be Indiana beating themselves.
Well, and I think the thing this might be the biggest home game of the year for Indiana. Cause like it's the
Cameron's thinking outside the box here. Maybe they all get
but like in all seriousness, like I know Michigan, like for us, Michigan's 5-4. There's a lot of smoke around the NCAA doing something. To Indiana, like remember Kurt Signetti's press conference or pep rally. Like Purdue sucks and so does Michigan and Ohio State. I guarantee you this game was circled on the calendar for Signetti.
Yeah.
Like I guarantee it. And that actually makes me question whether I think it's actually 34-17 or if it's going to be like 55-14, 55-10. Because I like you can lay all this out on the line. You have a bye after this week. You don't like, and so that means you don't have to think ahead to Ohio State. You can just think about Michigan. You're going to have all the fans there. It would take a miracle for Michigan to win this game. That's my assessment with everything
That's
from
your
a
analysis.
motivation standpoint. Just from a motivation standpoint.
Zach, I'm going to put a picture on the screen. You tell me if this guy looks like he is going to lose a football game right before the biggest game of the year. Hold on. I'm stalling. If you're on podcast, I apologize. Get through this with me for just 2 seconds. It's loading. All right. Zach, you tell me, is this guy going to lose? Oh my gosh, it's still loading. Okay. Is this guy going to lose a game before his biggest game of the year? It's 40-10. Look at that face.
He's like, guys, it's not enough.
Like,
he's like Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi. More.
It's like, I just like when I saw that on TV, I couldn't help but just like die laughing because it's like, dude, it's 40-10. You scored 40 unanswered points. You're absolutely destroying this team. And of course, I forget what happened exactly in this game, but he's like, no, it's not good enough. You guys need to keep doing better. Meanwhile, Sharon Moore is like, yay, we kicked a field goal. It's like improvement. Yay. Bryce Underwood. Did you see that completed pass? Like, we can't complete passes.
Bryce Underwood is not going to Michigan.
No, he's not.
It's like the word fetch in Mean Girls. Stop saying fetch. It's not going to happen.
I got to bring that picture up one more time. A man on a mission, Johnson.
There we go. That's a meme right there.
Well, it's like the picture of do you remember the picture of was it the Virginia Tech coach when it's like 0-0 and it's like end of regulation? He's like, yes. He's all excited. It's like 0-0, end of regulation. Like this is the opposite of that. It's 40-10, and Kirk Cinetti is as mad as can be.
I'm not impressed.
Yeah.
Not impressed.
Oh boy. All right, Zach. Anything else on this Indiana Michigan game before we get to the hot seat coaches?
No, I had a thought, but I'll table it.
Okay. All right. All right, everybody, we're going to do another ad really fast, and then we have hot seat coaches discussions. We want to get your thoughts as well. So if you have any coaches you think should be on the hot seat, we're going to have the buyouts for every single coach up here on the screen. You can see those, and we'll discuss all of them. So one more ad, and we'll be right back. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we remind you that you can also listen on podcast afterwards. So if you missed the show live, go ahead and listen on podcast. We appreciate you doing that as well. All right, Zach. All the buyouts are here. I apologize. My little banner covered up your at there. But these are all the buyouts for all the Big Ten coaches as it stands right now. Now, things will change after December 1st, but I think if we're talking about right now, the coaches that could possibly be fired, maybe like now or within the next few weeks or something like that. There are some buyouts here that I think definitely make that possible. I'm going to take the easiest one really fast, just so that way I can be right. Ryan Walters. You are
Get him out of here.
Like, you're out, not safe, whatever. Like, the hardest like umpire out I can possibly do. This is not going to go well for Ryan Walters. That's my first pick on hot seat, and I can almost guarantee he's going to be fired here in the next few weeks.
The question really is, why wasn't he fired like after Notre Dame?
I'm wondering if they just want to get through like this Ohio State game, and any other games they feel like they're just going to get absolutely blown out, and just use that as like,
that's fair.
Oh yeah, he's getting fired.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan Walters. So,
I apologize. If you're on podcast, Ryan Walters' buyout is $9.6 million. That is the second lowest in the Big Ten that we know of. We don't know of USC's, and we don't know Northwestern's because those are private universities. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Well, but we do know that USC's is astronomically large.
I've heard somewhere between 85 and 90 million.
Yeah. That being said, Lincoln Riley's my number 2. I had Ryan Walters number 1.
You think they're going to fire him before the end of the year or in the offseason or what?
I don't know. Well, this is a hot seat conversation. And I think part of my problem is I'm like, I don't know if any of the other coaches are in dire straits. Like, Lincoln Riley is at a bit of a crossroads because he might not make a bowl game this year. And that's why I was like, I don't know if he's desperate with the quarterback change to save his job. I do think he's desperate to rescue his reputation. Because this is not a James Franklin or a Ryan Day conversation. Like, people are upset at James Franklin because he can't beat Ohio State. Well, guess what? Almost nobody beats Ohio State. Ryan Day is like, people are upset at Ryan Day because he can't beat Michigan and loses to top 5 teams. Well, guess what? A lot of people don't beat top 5 teams. Lincoln Riley was supposed to be the savior for USC to get them back to the national championship picture. He went 8-5 with a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback a year ago, and now he's 4-5, losing to phenomenal teams and programs like Minnesota. No offense to Minnesota, they're good. But
they should have won that game, right? Like, if you are USC, what USC is full powered, no disrespect to Minnesota, but if USC is full powered and what they are supposed to be, they're supposed to win that game, even with it being at Minnesota.
Right. So they lost to Minnesota. They lost to the powerhouse known as Maryland in October, by the way. They lost to Washington, granted at Washington, but it's like, man, they're losing to all these teams. Like, if you told me they were 4-5 with a win over LSU, mind you, maybe the best team they've played aside from Penn State. Like, I don't know how you defend the past 2 years for Lincoln Riley.
You can't. I mean, he already used this card of firing the coordinator,
Yep.
and he comes back this year and he has the turmoil with the quarterbacks. It looks like he's possibly going to get Will Howard. That doesn't happen. Will Howard goes to Ohio State. Instead, they don't bring in a transfer portal quarterback, or I guess they did bring in Maiava, but they did not bring in a starting transfer portal quarterback. They lost the 5-star quarterback. What was his name? He went to Boise State. Looks like he didn't do anything with him because he couldn't even win the job at Boise State. So, what in the world was Lincoln Riley doing with that quarterback? Like,
Yep.
you have all, like, he is still living off the reputation of Baker Mayfield, walk-on quarterback, won the Heisman. He's still living off of that.
Yep.
It's not good enough. Like, you did that in the Big 12. Congratulations. The Big 12
Yep.
is not good, and it wasn't good back then either.
Yep.
And that's why every single time he got to the playoffs, he got blown out because he had a super high-powered offense that had a really good quarterback in the Big 12. Well, guess what? You get to the Big 10, there are actually defenses in the Big 10. Minnesota has a defense, right?
Yep.
I mean, all these teams that USC is losing to, they have defenses. It's very possible here in a couple weeks they lose to Nebraska because Nebraska has a defense. Now it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens with Maiava, but I mean, like, if you're Lincoln Riley, you have to play bad defenses in order to win. In the Pac-12 last year, the defenses got a lot better, and that's one of the reasons why they struggled, right? The year before that, the defenses weren't all that good. Who did they lose to in the title game? Utah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the only teams in the Pac-12 that year that had a good
Actually
defense.
played defense. Yeah.
Right? Like, granted, I know Caleb Williams got hurt in that title game, but still, like, Lincoln Riley has been hiding amongst bad defenses for a long time and getting to games where, he can kind of go off with the points. But you're in the Big Ten now. You can't hide around bad defenses. There's too many good defenses around, and I don't know if they fire him this year. But if they are going to fire him next year, the buyout is still going to be huge. Yeah. It's still going to be 70, 80 million. So the thought process I have there with that is, like, if you don't think he's the guy, you might as well fire him now because it's still going to be super expensive next year.
Yeah. Well, and I think the fear is, like, well, what are we going to do without that money? It's like you start from the ground, like you rebuild the foundation.
Right.
Like, so you get a guy who you want to be a culture guy, similar to another guy on my list, but like, I think what Nebraska's trying to do with Matt Rule, which I'm sure we'll get to Matt Rule in a bit, but like, Lincoln Riley's not the guy. Like, he's not who we thought he was. Like, I thought I was saying earlier in the season, give him patience, like, be patient with him. But this dude's not it. And I think I think to your point, he hid behind a weak Big 12 and a weak Pac-12 in 2021 or 2022.
2021.
Yeah.
And they got stronger in 2022 when they had Washington and Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, now he's exposed in a conference and he hasn't even played like the 3 best teams in the Big Ten. Right. He hasn't played Indiana. He hasn't played Oregon. He hasn't played Ohio State.
I think honestly what is more likely to happen with Lincoln Riley is honestly Lincoln Riley takes some kind of NFL job, whether that's a quarterback coach or an analyst or something like that, where he gets out, because I think, like, for Lincoln Riley, he has a lot of stuff he wants to get done. I still remember Big Ten media days, him being so cocky, so arrogant, and talking about all the stuff he wanted to do. I mean, he was talking about getting rid of the Notre Dame game off USC schedule. Like, you're not doing that if you're not a successful coach at USC. I'm sorry. Like, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to do that stuff, and the pressure's just going to mount and mount and mount. If he doesn't get fired, I actually think it's probably more likely USC is like, let us help you go somewhere else, and we won't charge them the buyout of, hiring you away for a quarterback job, because we just want to move on from you. We want to bring Lane Kiffin here. We want to bring somebody else. We want to bring Kirk Cignetti here. It would never happen, but, we want to bring somebody else here because you're just, quite frankly, not good enough. All right, couple questions, and then we'll get to the next head coach on the hot seat. Derby says Lincoln Riley, I thought, had USC on the right track. I mean, after the first year, you thought so, right?
Yep.
They had won what 4 or 5 games the year before, and then he won 13 or 12 with them, 11 or 12. Like it was a massive improvement. You thought so, but like I said, he was hiding behind some bad defenses. Philip says, "Who's Signetti gonna take, or who's gonna take a run at Signetti and make him say no?" I don't know, Zach.
Yeah.
USC, I mentioned them. I don't think Signetti would go to USC.
No.
He wouldn't go to Purdue. Purdue's not any better than Indiana.
No.
Indiana, I would argue, is a better job than Purdue.
I think Signetti would have to go, like if he was going to leave for somewhere, he'd have to go somewhere that a national championship opportunity is like there for the taking in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure there's a job like that right now. Like everybody's talking about Florida and Auburn.
Yeah, Florida's probably your best bet.
Yeah.
I mean,
Florida
he knows
with
the South, but
yeah, Florida with DJ Lagway like could be, but I don't know if they're going to get rid of Napier the way that they're starting to rebound a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to have to see what jobs open up first, but I also think IU's going to do everything they can to not let him go.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to do everything they can.
I agree.
Cameron says if they are having issues raising NIL funds like USC has started, I don't know when or how they're going to fire him. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and that's why I'm saying like maybe there's a conversation behind closed doors. It's like, dude, you don't want to coach here. We don't want you coaching here. Like, you know, just go to the NFL and get some kind of job with a quarterback or something like that, you know, and just let's part ways mutually here.
Yeah.
All right, my next one, Zach, and then we'll see if you have another one after that. We did have somebody ask about Luke Fickell. I lost that comment. I apologize. I think Luke Fickell, I don't think he gets fired after this year, especially with a $40 million buyout.
Yeah. I was going to say, before you say, I have two guys like Ryan Walters and Lincoln Riley are my two where I'm like, Ryan Walters definitely and Lincoln Riley potentially this year. Those are my only two. But I have a lot of like, if things go bad, like.
Yeah, my other one, if things go bad, is Maryland, where they need to win at least 3 more games this season. They're 4-4 right now. And yeah, their final games are at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, Penn State. Penn State.
Do you think
you see one win there, maybe?
Do you think they would fire Loxley this year, though?
I think so. That buyout is only $17 million. He's bringing in talent, but he's not doing anything with it.
Yeah.
Like, and I think if you're Maryland, you're like, why are we afraid of losing our talent if this guy brings in talent, but he doesn't do anything with it, right? Like,
yeah,
you have to justify it at some point and say, like, I know the schedule was pretty tough for him here at the end of the year, but I mean, they should have beat Northwestern. They should have beat Michigan State.
Yeah.
But I mean, they would be 6-4, 6-2 right now if they did.
Yeah. I just think, and Cameron hits my thought kind of right on the nose. Every Maryland fan I talk to loves Loxley. And like they are very quick to defend him, which I just find odd because I'm like, don't you want more? But like, I'm not sure they do. Like from 2021 to 2023, every time I criticized Loxley, and like literally every time, they'd be like, he's improved every year. He's improved the record. He wins bowl games. He's recruiting well and he's developing players. And I'm like, I don't agree with you.
I mean, he is recruiting well. Like, he's getting talent in there. But that's my thing is, like, they improve one more win and kind of like and if you are crediting a coach with winning bowl games as like some big accomplishment today of why you should keep him around, I'm sorry, you don't understand football. Like, you don't understand the way football is played anymore. Bowl games are not an accomplishment that keeps a team or keeps a coach around anymore. because they just don't mean as much as they once did. I've heard some Maryland fans seem like they're happy with him, but I've also heard Maryland fans that are just like, we're never going to do anything with this guy. We have a good recruiting base in the DMV. We, joined the Big Ten thinking that this was a more premier basketball conference. And what have we done since we got here? Nothing.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, Maryland is a program that, honestly, like, even in the new Big Ten, they should probably be in the top 5 every 4 or 5 years at the very least with how you can recruit.
Yeah.
Like, the DMV has a lot of talent,
Yep.
especially with the ACC being down right now and you being the premier one over there on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's you and Rutgers.
Yep.
And Rutgers is further away, so yeah. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Loxley. I guess that we could see him maybe fired after December 1st if, maybe the buyout gets substantially lower. I don't know what it is after December 1st, but yeah. Did you have another one?
Well, I was gonna say, so Loxley was 8 for me.
He was 8th?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, who's your third then?
Which that's not my personal feeling, by the way. That was just thinking, I don't know if Maryland actually wants to get rid of him. But
yeah,
my number 3, and I don't think this will happen, is James Franklin.
Yeah. The buyout's just so big, man.
Yeah. Well, and it's like Lincoln Riley, I feel like actually gives a lot of perspective to James Franklin and Ryan Day.
Yeah.
Because it's like USC was relevant even, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years. I forget when they were most relevant nationally, but like it wasn't that long ago. And they've gotten the big name coach and they suck.
Yeah.
Like, so do you really want to go down the road of getting rid of James Franklin when his biggest failure is to not beat a top 5 team that has been running the conference except for the past 3 years? Like, so I don't think he's actually on the hot seat, but like he would be my number 3. I ranked the top 9 hot seat coaches. Do you want me to go through that list real quick?
Sure, just give you. Yeah, go ahead.
So I had Ryan Walters, Lincoln Riley, James Franklin, Fickle, because I haven't seen much improvement there. Matt,
are you taking in buyout or are you just going straight job?
Yeah, but buyout and years.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted. Good.
So Luke Fickle, again, I think he's safe because of both buyout and years, but I think his seat's starting to get warm.
Next year, yeah.
Yeah. Matt Rule is the same way. Like, I think he's safe because of the buyout and because of it's only year 2. But
you have to make a bowl game this year.
Yeah, if you don't make a bowl game, there is a concern that you don't make it to year 3.
I think he still makes it to year 3 because this is a fan base that's been through a lot, and that buyout is huge. It's about the same as Franklin's. I think it's really contentious in year 3, and I think the fans are not nearly as much behind him as maybe they once were. And I think Dylan Raiola helps as well too. If he keeps Dylan Raiola and he doesn't transfer away, I think that helps too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd put it like 60, 65, 35 that he'd be on for year 3. But it'd get dicey. So 5, I'm at Rule. 6, I have Ryan Day, just because I think if they don't beat Michigan, like I think
he has to win the national championship if they don't beat Michigan.
Yeah, like it's like that is almost an automatic fireable offense in Columbus at this point. 7, I have Sharon Moore. And the buyout is a big part of it. And the fact that they have looked awful in their coach. If they don't make a bowl game, which is possible, it's on the table.
He still has the fire the coordinators excuse. And the way with how recruiting is going, he still has that excuse. I think Sharon Moore is safe for at least 1 more year, if not 2, because of the recruiting. And I think he fires both of his coordinators this year and finds somebody else. I don't think it's going to get any better. I mean, it might get a little better, but I don't think it's going to be much better.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's why I have him 7th. I don't actually think he's in danger, but I have Loxley 8th, and a big reason. Like, I think all of your reasons reasonably, like, fire him yesterday. I don't think Maryland cares enough to do so. And then
Well, and
number
actually, Philip brings up a good point. If they're trying to fire their basketball coach at the same time, that's two buyouts to pay, especially going into this revenue sharing era where money is going to be coming from the athletic department to pay these players. Like, I actually heard a really good thought the other. Actually, do your ninth one really fast, and then we'll talk about that.
yeah, ninth is Shiano. I think the way that this season has gotten away from him a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, he's ninth. I don't actually think he's going anywhere, but buyouts not super high. I think the expectations were super high, and
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I heard somebody talking about this the other day. They were talking about how revenue sharing is coming into college football now, and they actually thought you were going to see a lot less firings nowadays because of the buyouts and how much they cost and how people were operating contracts under the old way where you didn't have to pay money out of the athletic department. And so their thought process is we're actually going to see a record number of non-firings of head coaches here in the next 2 or 3 years because the buyouts are going to be so big. And some of these buyouts are going to be more than the $20 million they can put toward players. And the thought process is like, well, this is going to be like the NFL where like a lot of these teams realize maybe our coach isn't all that great, but we need talent and we need to save money for that talent. And if you fire a head coach with a $50 million buyout, part of that is cutting into your, revenue sharing, NIL, whatever you want to call it, paying players budget. And so, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with this discussion is like, I really do feel like the only two like big talking points for to be fired are what do we say? Purdue and who was the other second one we said? James Franklin?
no, Lincoln Riley.
Oh, Lincoln Riley. Yeah, sorry. But even Lincoln Riley, I'm like, that's why I think it's more like, hey, let's mutually agree to leave here. We want to fire you, but we don't want to do that because we don't want to pay you so much of a buyout that we can't pay to bring in players. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I look at it and I'm like, honestly, I don't think we see any more than two coaches being fired this year from the Big Ten at most, maybe only one.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Do you think that makes sense, or do you have a different thought?
I don't think. Yeah, I think everyone else. I think the money piece is so important because, it'd be the thing that would keep USC from firing Lincoln.
Right.
Is like, how do we keep our roster? I wonder if for USC it's a matter of how do we stop the bleeding and rebuild.
Right.
And sometimes that means you got to cut. Sometimes that means you have to implode something to rebuild it. And I actually wonder if USC needs something like that because there was a part of me that thought that what they're going through could happen, but with their roster, there's no reason why it should be this. If Lincoln Riley is who he was supposed to be, there's no reason why they should be this bad. But they're not good.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to they can't win games at the end of the game. They're there, and all of them, like we said, the numbers love them because they're right there. But
yeah, I do. It's interesting too. Just one more thought to what you're saying about the revenue sharing. I do think that's a great equalizer in the sport, which I think the sport desperately needs because it still doesn't limit the wild, wild west nature of things, which I wish that would change.
right.
But this is a start because you have to manage the amount of money that you are sharing now with the coach as well as the players. And that's going to limit your ability to just go hog wild on players with reckless abandon. Like you actually are going to have some restraint because you also got to pay the coaching staff. So
and the other or go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done.
No. I just think that's helpful.
Yeah. The other part of this too is I think a lot of people don't realize how these athletic departments are going to operate. These athletic directors were not made to be general managers. These athletic directors were not hired to do that job. What's probably going to happen is we are probably going to see coaches hire general manager type people in their program. And that's going to make it even harder to fire some of these coaches, is because the one who's kind of managing the program and kind of in charge of using the revenue for players and stuff like that, they're going to be hired by the head coach. It's almost backward, right? Like in the NFL, the general manager is hired by the president, and then the general manager has the ability to sign all the players and fire the head coach. In this scenario, I think most schools are going to be hiring their general manager from their head coach, and then it's actually going to be the athletic director that fires the head coach. The general manager will be gone, the entire staff will be gone, and so you fire a coach. It's not like you just like, oh, lost the head coach,
It's all
and have the general manager hire a new one. Nope, you're firing the head coach, and he's taking everybody with him. You got to hire a new general manager. You got to hire a new strength and conditioning coach, whole new staff. Like, how many buyouts do those staff members have? Like,
that's a really good point. Yeah, like the structure, and I think Cameron had mentioned, like, very happy we have Ross Bajork to lead us. I think people were upset about him coming in because he wasn't like a traditional athletic director. But I think that's a really insightful thought. Ross is much more in the mold of a guy who is like, he is a bit more general manager ish
right.
in terms of how he thinks about finances, how he thinks about constructing a staff. So I, but I think you're right. I think the way we're imposing NFL like structures on the college game is going to have impacts behind the scenes that we did not think about initially.
And that's why, like, I know a lot of people hate it, but I'm almost for some of these, like, 70-35 team leagues in college football instead of the big, huge 134, FBS, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the 134 FBS, but Kent State is not going to be able to operate the same way that Ohio State can, right? Like, it's just, they can't operate that same way.
There's our one Kent State reference.
Yeah. Where's John Jacobs when we need him?
Yeah.
But yeah. So, unless you have any other thoughts, I think I'm good with leaving the conversation there.
Yep. I think this is a good pause button for now.
All right. We will revisit hot seat and stuff like that again, I'm sure, probably around bowl time, and see, what people are thinking. And I'm sure there will be some firings, maybe one or two, and we'll talk about head coaches and stuff like that when that happens. But for now, we are going to leave the conversation there. This is a good thought by Cameron. He says G5 needs their own tournament like the NIT. I wouldn't hate it. I would watch the heck out of a G5 tournament. That would be awesome to see.
That'd be pretty fantastic, actually.
That would be like what a college football playoff would have been years ago, right? Like,
yep.
Anyway, sorry, we don't want to get on another subject. But all right, Zach. Hey, good episode here. We went long for you all, so that way you didn't have to pay as much attention to the election. Go to your bed, lay down, put your head on the pillow. You'll wake up tomorrow, check out everything, and you know what? It'll be okay. You'll still have college football, and you'll still get to watch your team on Saturday.
Wait, there was an election today?
Shh.
What were we voting for?
Cupcakes or cake at your birthday?
Both. I want them both.
We need if the electoral votes tie, then sure. But all right, Zach, what do you got going on at Big Ten Football Talk Thursday? You got an episode coming up?
Yeah, we'll do some more playoff reaction. That'll be what we do, and then I'll take a week off since I'll be on vacation after that. But
good stuff. One last question. Waffles or pancakes?
Oh man, that's such a hard, because it depends on where I go.
I go with waffles generally because they are generally more crisp. But if you go to a place that has the right pancakes.
Yeah. So there's a place, JR, if you ever come to to go to a Penn State game.
Which I need to come see you.
Yeah, the original waffle shop in State College, phenomenal pancakes. Phenomenal. Which is hilarious because they're called the waffle shop. But Their pancakes are phenomenal. But in general, I would say waffles over
Nice.
pancakes as well.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's a place with really good pancakes, I'll go with the pancakes, but I
Yeah.
need a quality pancake. Can't just have a regular one.
So there's a secret to crisp pancakes.
Okay.
Cook them in bacon grease.
Oh, I've heard that. I've heard that. I've
Yeah.
actually heard people say cook the bacon inside the pancake and it helps it get a little bit crispier because the grease is coming off in the middle.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good thought.
Yeah.
I always forget about that.
Yeah, it's so good.
Braska Rascal says, "Let's go another hour." You're saying "let's go." You just have to comment. Not as much work for you, Braska Rascal. No, we appreciate you guys watching and that you do like the show. Philip says basketball show coming up. Yep, we'll have a basketball show Thursday. Me and Kent are going to be on, so Kent will come back. Kent was only going to come on for like a month at a time, and now that basketball season started, he might come on every week again. He said he said he needed to draw back a little bit. But I don't know. I don't think he can stay away. So we'll see. We'll see how often Kent comes on, but probably at least once a week or every other week. He made it sound like so. So we'll see.
Kent's awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah, and of course we'll have Kent for the power ranking show also Saturday. I don't think he has any Halloween costume parties or anything. So, basketball show probably will look a little bit different than the football show. Obviously, we won't be able to go through and recap and preview every single game and stuff like that. So we'll do our best to mention every single team as often as we can in the episodes, but it'll be much more kind of like, standout players this week and stuff like that. Probably less actual game recaps. On the basketball channel, I'm doing game recaps kind of by myself. So if you want to watch those, you can check it out over there. I was going to do the Washington game tonight, but that game started at 10 and it's an hour since then, so I haven't watched any of it.
That's fair. How about Ohio State beating Texas?
That was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our predictions. I went with the prediction of 75-70. That was my hopeful prediction.
Yeah.
Turned out it was much better than my thoughtful prediction.
Yeah. What was your thoughtful prediction?
I think my thoughtful one was 72-66 Texas. But
You weren't a believer.
Listen, I just need to keep picking against Ohio State. I should have picked against Ohio State against Purdue because past 2 times I picked against them, they've won. So.
I think you're safe with Purdue.
Yeah, should be. We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know. Mickey Mouse pancakes.
I think the big thing is Mickey waffles.
Mickey waffles are good. I've had those at Disney before.
Yeah.
David Greenshield asks, does Ohio State make the NCAA tournament? They looked like they should against Texas.
I didn't say last night helps.
Yeah. I think their big thing is they got to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Stay healthy. And do you see that freshman, Junie Mobley?
Oh, yeah, dude.
He is so good, man.
Yeah.
He's got Steph Curry range.
Yeah. He's got to work on the defensive side of the ball, but
yeah.
Which, it's kind of like Steph Curry.
Most freshmen do. Yeah. Well, yeah, and Steph Curry does too. So, all right, guys, we're going to get out of here. We appreciate you being here and watching the entire episode. We will be back, like I said, Thursday. You'll be able to catch it on this channel, or if you want to, go subscribe to the basketball channel as well. Be posting additional videos and stuff over there that you can find. And then, after that, we will have the Power Rankings episode on Saturday night. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. We appreciate it. Have a good one.